Over a century ago, We Raise Foundation began as a Lutheran ministry serving people with tuberculosis. That mission has changed and expanded to focus on ending poverty, violence, and inequality in all our communities. To learn more, let's welcome Paul Miles, president of We Raise. We also welcome Doug Lowe, executive director of Kids Express, one of We Raise's grantees. And we welcome Marco Dodd, who is a mentee, then a mentor, and is now assistant director at Kids Express. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
How did We Raise evolve from starting out with a mission focused on tuberculosis to what it's focused on today? How did that strategically happen?
Yeah, our origins began really in 1905 with what was then a significant issue facing society, and that was tuberculosis. And a group of Lutheran congregations came together because people were starting to come to central Colorado as a result of the dry, arid climate if they were afflicted with tuberculosis. And they said, we're not going to wait for some national program or some big funder to step in. We're going to get involved in that situation and create a solution. So over a period of time, for about 60, 70 years, we served people afflicted with tuberculosis. As science caught up to that disease, we started to become more broad-based in our work. And we had sold our assets in Colorado, established a foundation, and have been making grants to organizations, individuals, congregations to do work of varying degrees around the world. In recent days, we have changed from Wheat Ridge Foundation and then Wheat Ridge Ministries to We Raise Foundation, which is focused on poverty, violence, and inequality. We chose those issues because we believe, just as those churches in 1905 did, that these are the issues shaping communities today, and we wanted to be part of the solution.
Great. And so part of being the solution is supporting organizations like Kids Express. Can you share a little bit about the mission and how Kids Express got started and how you got hooked up with We Raise?
So Kids Express started back in 1997. The founders were really looking for a way to bridge the gap between Oak Park and Austin. And so it became this program that was founded in the basement of a church, a Good Shepherd Lutheran church. And for the longest time, once a week, we would pull up in these vans and young kids would come running out of their apartment buildings, jump in the vans, and we would take them over to this church. And this went on for probably a good 10 years. And what we noticed was that we were losing a lot of our kids. We were losing a lot of our boys who were starting around 10 or 11, 12. When they started getting older, they began going to the streets, getting into life. And so what we did was we figured we needed to have a presence in the community if we were really going to make a difference. So in 2005, we bought a building right in the neighborhood. And that's where it really began, where we started having programs that were, instead of 1 day a week, went to 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and eventually we are now operating 6 days a week. So that's how it really started.
And to piggyback on what Doug said, I was a part, of those first groups of kids from South Austin. And I was also fortunate enough to work on that first building that we purchased.
Cool.
It was my first summer job. So they came into the neighborhood and they decided to, start their roots and build their roots here. And they took a chance on the kids in the community, me and my friends. So with them giving us so many opportunities to better ourselves, to learn from them in the process of doing that, and to be a part of building and the solutions in the neighborhood, it made me stick around. It made me want to tell other people so they can have those same opportunities. And I think that's pretty much what we're all about.
So would you say that it was, in particular, did you have an individual mentor that made a difference to you?
Well, my individual mentor was Doug right here. Coming into South Austin, it's a predominantly black neighborhood. So
Predominantly black?
Well, 99.9% black. So my mentor was an Asian guy. Most of the mentors there were, they didn't look like me. They weren't African American. They were either white, Asian, or anything other than African American. So we had to take a chance as far as listening and learning from them the same way they took a chance on wanting to help us get that information. So I learned a lot from this guy here.
What did he do initially to connect, I wonder?
Well, initially it was tough. I mean, when you first come into a new community and you see people that don't really look like you, it's tough to, I guess, trust what they're saying or get involved with what they want to do. So I guess what he did best was stick around.
Perseverance.
You know, even when things were tough with us, they always kept coming back. So that let me know that they were here for the long haul. That let me know that they were willing to work with me to figure out whatever we had to accomplish or wanted to do. And that helped build that relationship. So once I was able to trust that he was going to stick around and be there, it was easier for me to open up.
But I think that a big part of it was that our program was different than almost any other program in the neighborhood at that time. You know, there were after-school programs, there were camps, there were lots of different types of programs. But what we really based our program on was building strong relationships with the kids. And so that's where it became critical. As he said, I became his mentor. Being his mentor wasn't the easiest thing in the world sometimes. But it really was a challenge as to how do we build relationships with these kids, because what we found out was these were kids, just ordinary kids that were struggling in a very difficult environment, and they wanted to be kids.
So that brings us back to Paul and the We Raise Foundation, that we have this really great program that started with volunteers in a relationship, but found that you needed resources. You needed to be able to have a building, be able to pay staff, be able to pay from people in the community and say that this work is valuable and we want you to be here and be a consistent relationship with our youth so that they have safe space and safe relationships to be able to learn and develop and grow. So how did you get connected, and how do you think about your work in supporting organizations like Kids Express?
Yeah, this new iteration of our foundation, we kind of focus on this concept of imagination. For our historical constituency, those generous people that have supported us, it's hard for them to wrap their imagination around 1,000 shootings in the past few years. It's hard for them to wrap their imagination around a young person in their teens who simply doesn't even imagine what life after 25 looks like, because too many people don't make it to that point. They're in one of two places. They're in a cemetery or they're in jail. And so they don't allow themselves to imagine what a life full of possibilities could be. We think people like Marco are so critical to that conversation, because in part, we don't have to say, dream about this. We can introduce them to Marco. He's the living embodiment of what a life of possibilities looks like. And for us, as part of our future now, part of what we want to do is we want to start to stimulate that imagination. We want to take people into these communities so that they can understand what it is they're dealing with, what they're living with. We brought our board of directors to Kids Express, and one of the things that Doug had us do is we touched the walls that had the bullet holes in them. And that's real. It became so much more real for us. They live this every day. But I would also tell you that there's kind of a collective failure of imagination in the greater society as it relates to the work of organizations like Kids Express and others who are doing this work, in that we have largely said we want great people like Doug to be doing this work. We want terrific products of the program to come back and work like Marco. We want the greatest outcomes. We want reductions in violence. We want safer communities. We want healthier communities. And we want you to do that with the least amount of money possible. Okay? We want you to be the most efficient organization. That's what we've said, and that's the mistake. The failure of imagination is not asking the right question, which is, what could happen in this community if resources were not the issue? And we don't lack resources. We don't lack for leaders. We don't lack for ideas and solutions. We lack the will to generate the resources that they need. And that's part of what we want to put ourselves as a foundation on that path, to start helping people to imagine not just what a community could become, but that 9-year-old boy who says, I don't think about the future because I don't know that I'm going to have one. What could that boy be if he wasn't burdened by poverty, violence, and inequality? Could he become one of the great engineers or teachers or leaders, elected officials? Could he be a musician, an entrepreneur? Could he create the next technology company? We need to help him imagine by using our own and then putting into action to put resources behind great organizations like Kids Express.
Thank you, Paul, Doug, and Marco. I'm Liz Dunn for Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.